Welcome back to Beernid 40K. Today I got a chance to look at the new Kroot faction rules for Kill Team. But there are a lot of things to talk about with these carnivorous bird aliens, so today we'll take a quick look and see why it's not so easy being green. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel here on Beernid 40K, and with that out of the way, let's talk Kroot and Kill Team. The first thing to consider is that the Kroot carnivores can now be taken alongside Tau in Kill Team. However, they are also their own separate and unique Kill Team faction now. So, do you take Kroot as part of a Tau list, or do you take them as part of their own faction? One interesting thing to note is that for now, only the Kroot carnivores themselves can be taken alongside Tau. So no Hounds or Krootox riders can come along in a Tau list at this point, even though they are available models if you take the Kroot as their own faction. It's unfortunate for the Kroot though, because the current Tau faction is so strong in Kill Team that the carnivores by themselves will have a tough time finding a place there, in my opinion, especially in the highly competitive and Darwinian environment that Kill Team has bred by having lists with 8 plasmas, frag cannons all over the place, or 12-point Genestealer cult acolytes that can kill a 100-point commander with 1 attack. Simply put, the Tau have sat at the top since the earliest days of Kill Team, and so the carnivores needed to be amazing to edge out the current mainstays in most lists. In a Tau list, the main thing these carnivores are competing to replace are Fire Warriors or Pathfinders, which is tough because Fire Warriors and Pathies aren't usually taken very often themselves, besides the obligatory Tau Rail Rifle and Comms Specialist. Gun drones themselves are just too good, and they outcompete all these other choices. Now, carnivores do have the same 7-inch movement as a Pathy, which is 1 inch better than a Fire Warrior, but both of those current Tau units have access to For the Greater Good and better saves than the Kroot carnivore, and I see the 1 to 2 points of cost increase over the carnivore as worth it if you're debating on which of the 3 to take, especially also considering that Pathies and Fire Warriors have ways to buff their survivability even further by utilizing drones and the Bonding Knife ritual, so that helps to shore up the poor leadership that is an often overlooked challenge for Tau players. So the current Tau troops beat the carnivores in my estimation. As for the drones, I don't see the carnivores replacing gun drones either, if I'm honest, because an 8-inch move that also has fly, with savior protocols, with For the Greater Good, and they can shoot better weapons than a carnivore twice each round, that only costs 7 points. 1 more point than the Kroot carnivore. Drones are simply too good to be going anywhere. So, Kroot will likely remain their own faction for a bit. You might see them in fluffy Tau lists and narrative campaigns, but the way that I think that you'll see these the most is as their own faction. So can these guys work? It's possible, but it's not easy being green. One plus is that the carnivores have a strength 4 rapid fire 1 weapon, so basically for 6 points you're getting a Space Marine bolter that hits on 4s. In a 100-point game you can take 16 of these, and the opponent would have to kill or wound 9 to start forcing break tests. However, just know that when those tests start coming, statistically the math gods favor you failing from that very first roll, since there are 6 ways to roll a 7, 5 ways to roll an 8, 4 ways to roll a 9, and on and on. With Leadership 6, you also risk shaking right away with nerve tests, since even just 1 model out of action would have you at a 16% risk of shaking on each guy with a flesh wound. If you lose 2 models to an out of action result, anybody else with a flesh wound is at a 33% risk of shaking, and so on. It just gets worse and worse with each model lost, until, with 5 or more models out of action, your models are only passing those nerve tests on a 1. So simply put, the bad leadership mixed with a 6-up save is a recipe for trouble and something this faction is going to struggle with. And I know that already some of you are saying, hey, plenty of factions have models with low saves, low toughness, and poor morale, and you're absolutely right. The Tyranid Hormigaunt, for example, which I run myself, has leadership 5, toughness 3, and a 6-up save, but they also have synapse creatures making them auto-pass nerve tests, so as long as those linchpin models are alive, NIDs can make stuff like this work. They also have plenty of leadership 9 around in the faction, meaning when morale does come up, NIDs can be surprisingly hard to crack for a spammy faction. Orcs also have a poor leadership, but they're toughness 4 base, so if you look at a rapid-fire 1 weapon like a bolter, it has less than a 50% chance to even hit the orc standing out in the open beyond 12 inches, and the toughness 4 means even if they get hit by that strength 4 gun, only 50% of the shots are going to go on to a wound roll. Orcs also have a ton of attacks in close combat and the ability to reroll charges, and their commandos have a built-in 2-hit modifier that debuffs enemy shooting, so again, they can make it work. But it's not all doom and gloom for the Kroot. The Krootox riders are great. 4 wounds, toughness 5, 2 attacks base and a special rule letting them advance 12 inches every turn is really good, even with the bad save and the poor leadership of the faction. Their gun is great too, with a 48-inch rapid-fire 1 profile, which means they're pumping out 2 shots from across the table at 24 inches away. And each of those shots are strength 7, AP -1, and they do D3 damage each. You can make one of these a heavy specialist and do 3 of those shots per turn if you use the more bullets tactic for 1 CP, which can pretty much guarantee an early kill that can cripple the enemy team in the beginning of the game. These guys are great in melee too. The 4 wounds stacked with toughness 5 will keep them swinging once they get in, and they come stock with 2 strength 6 attacks that do 2 damage each in close combat. They can also be a combat specialist for the extra attack, and the faction has a tactic, Primal Savagery, letting a Kroot rider fight again in each phase. Now, this can stack even further with another tactic, Unfettered Aggression, which gives +1 attack, bringing a combat spec Kroot to a potential 8 strength 6, 2 damage attacks if you have the 2 CP to pull it off. You made him a combat spec, and you've done the right bookkeeping with declaring charges, all after you survive the slog to make it into melee. The downside to the Kroot rider is you can only take one of them, so you're going to need to pick either the heavy specialism and go shooty, or the combat specialism and go punchy. The great movement will really help them get to close combat, but that gun is the best in the faction and you only get one of them. So it's a hard choice. You're going to need to tailor to your enemy for the day. And I can tell you right now that this thing is the first priority I'm going to try to shoot down if I'm standing across from one. However, Kroot Hounds can be a good delivery system for these guys if you're able to get them into charge range first. You can keep them in front to provide an obscured penalty to somebody trying to shoot the Krootoks too. So they also have a pretty decent tactic letting you go to 2d6 on the injury roll for 1 CP. So if you get a wound through with one of these Kroot Hounds, it's pretty useful against anything besides Necrons. However, the Kroot Hounds have one of the worst LD, so at toughness 3 and a 6-up save, they're going to go down fast and can potentially speed up the morale issues in this faction. You will need to close the distance and survive before they can charge, and then you're going to die very quickly in CC with that low toughness and the low attacks that they have. So I really think the best role for the Kroot Hounds is to screen the Krootoks as it moves and shoots en route to melee combat, or just keep a few around to screen him as he shoots from the backfield. So that's it. To quickly sum all of this up, these guys are squishy, and the low points cost means you're going to be spamming numbers. But these guys can potentially pump out a lot of DACA. The one Kroot rider you can take is an absolute monster, and these guys have pretty good CP tactics to lean on. I actually might even build a small team of these up sometime next year. I've had a box of these kicking around the hobby pile for years now, and I think it would be cool to model these up like they've been infected by gene stealers or have eaten some orcs or something. I really like the fluff of these guys, and even though I know a lot of people will disagree, I think they look awesome and are a cool idea for a Xenos species. And not a lot of people know this, but the Kroot were almost their own faction in Warhammer 40k. So they have a cool bit of history to them, and this supplement for Kill Team is fun in my opinion because we kind of get to see the Kroot as their own faction for the very first time. Now, they might not be the most competitive thing in the world, but they might just surprise you in the hands of a skilled player, and especially they'll probably do well in objectives games against certain matchups that can't take a lot of bodies. For fans of the faction, fans of the fluff, and people playing narrative games, I think these will be a fun addition overall. So, what do you think? Do you see yourself playing Kroot either on their own or as part of the Tau faction? Do you see things in a similar way to myself, or did you notice something I might have left out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and have yourself a very happy new year. This is Beernid40k, and I'll be back again soon.